Okay, welcome in. I have now found a new method on how to record videos, and this is going to save me a ton of heartache and a lot of pain moving forward. As if anyone has tuned in the past, I've always had a tablet recording a screen on the TV and talking about sports and whatnot. Now I'm able to screen record, which is going to save me a lot of time, and I don't have to worry about the light affecting it. There was a lot of factors into why the videos were so poor in the past, but now that I can screen record on here, I'm going to be doing this 100% for football, hockey, any type of news. This is great. So anyways, week one, I did my predictions. I went 13-3. Week two, I didn't do as good, but I will go through the scores of the games and then let you know how I did with my predictions, my overall record, and I do plan on doing a preview for week number 3 in this same video as well. Might as well get two birds stoned at once. So the very first game was the Thursday night game between the Green Bay Packers and the Washington Commanders. I was actually fortunate because I took last week off. Normally I have to work Thursday and Fridays, so unfortunately I won't be able to see a lot of Thursday night games, but with that being said, I am able to watch the Monday night games, and I guess there's an upside and a downside to both of those. Anyway, so I did predict that Green Bay would win. They would, 27-18, so I started off 1-0 with that game. The next game you can see at the bottom of the screen had the Ravens and the Browns. I did predict that Baltimore would win, bounce back, and they have. They're now sitting at 1-1, if I'm not mistaken. The Browns, unfortunately, have dropped to 0-2. I might as well tell you the Packers are 2-0, and the Commanders are 1-1. So, 2 games, 2 correct, but you'll see moving forward how I did the rest of the way. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals played host to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Battle of the Cats, I guess you could technically say. I did predict that Cincinnati would win, but unfortunately it did come at a cost as Joe Burrow did leave the game, and he's expected to miss at least 3 months due to a toe turf, I believe is what the correct term is called. I'm sure there probably is another word for it properly, but that's a huge loss for the Bengals. They're going to have a lot of questions as to whether they keep Browning as the quarterback and hopefully he can lead them to a few victories over the next couple of months, or do they go and try to trade for a quarterback? They need to do something urgently, because if they happen to go on a losing streak and say when Joe Burrow comes back, let's just say hypothetically they're over the next 3 months, that's a minimum of 11 games because they should have a bye week at some point. They could, if they're below 500 by the time he comes back, it could be just like last season where it's too little too late. But it's very unfortunate because Cincinnati, the last 2 or 3 seasons, they've got off to poor starts and then they got red hot in like the months of October, November, December. And then they did make the playoffs in a couple of seasons. They obviously missed it on last year. So, yes, they're 2-0. Yes, they're the top team in their division. But without Burrow, I don't know how much faith I have in the team going forward. I mean, they had to come back and win against Jacksonville. And Jacksonville's not that great of a team, not trying to be disrespectful to them at all. But I just think it's going to be a tough row to hoe for the Bengals, especially when you have to go up against, say, you have to go up against the Ravens twice and the Steelers twice. There's no guaranteed wins against those teams. You could get a split by all means, but I think it's going to be very tough for that team going forward without Joe Burrow. So the next game had the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. I did not see this coming by a mile away. I figured after the Cowboys they lost to the Eagles in week 1, they'd want to have a really strong bounce-back game. This was back and forth, and I think if I'm not mistaken, I seen a stat that said that there were 6 lead changes in the fourth quarter alone. These teams just went punch for punch, and it came down to literally a last-second field goal in overtime to prevent the tie, and the Cowboys would win on the screen 40-37. So the Cowboys are now 1-1. The Giants are 0-2. I should also mention the Jaguars, with the loss, are 1-1. I got to try to keep up to date with the standings. So, a bit of a blowout in Detroit. I did predict that the Lions would win. 52-21 would be the final score. I didn't think it'd be that bad. But after the Lions got wrecked in week 1 against the Packers, I knew that they wanted to have a little bit of payback and take it out on the next team. And they sure did, getting 52 points in one game is mighty impressive, to say the least. So yeah, the Lions are now 1-1. The Bears, I believe, are 1-1, or are they 0-2? Just checking the standings here right now. 0-2. 0-2, sorry. All right, now, this was a game that I thought the Dolphins could have, should have won. Unfortunately, they were not able to. 33-27 would be the final score in favor of the Patriots, snapping a long winless streak in Miami. With the victory, the Patriots are now 1-1 on the season, and the Dolphins are 0-2. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, if you're 0-2, how can you really guarantee you're going to bounce back? The season's still young. There's a lot of X factors. They still technically have 15 games left of the season, so really, in my opinion, there's no need to panic just yet. But because of the way they've lost, it's just so inconsistent. Like, week 1, they put up 6 points, and then they put up 27 points the next week after. You'd want a little bit more consistency from your offense, I guess, and hopefully more help from your defense. And special teams, I'll put that in there as well. So, this is a very strange situation for the Dolphins to be in. I honestly would have guessed that. Now again, they could easily flip the script and win 2 games in a row, get back to 500. I'm not saying that it's not impossible, but when you're already 2 games behind the Bills, and spoiler alert, they did win. I'll get to their game in just a second, and you already lost to the Patriots. That's a big division loss right there. Like, I think a division loss hurts worse more than an interconference matchup or another team from the AFC, because you're trying to fight for a higher seeding in your division to have a better chance of making the playoffs. The likeliness of 2 or 3 teams coming out of a division is very scarce and very rare. Now, with that being said, the AFC West probably has 2, maybe 3 teams. The AFC North, I'm going to say, has at least 2 teams that should qualify for the playoffs. So realistically, for the AFC East and the AFC South respectively, whoever wins that division, they're likely going to be the only 2 teams that make the postseason. So yeah, very tough loss for the Dolphins. Hopefully they can have a bounce-back game. If not, I guarantee they'll be having some trade requests by the trade deadline. All right, now, this one here, I initially did circle San Francisco to win this game. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be. They did win, but then when I made my prediction, I wanted New Orleans to have an upset, only because I thought it could have been like a trap game for the 49ers. Not just that, but because they lost Brock Purdy, George Kittle. They're banged up. They're beat up. They're missing a lot of key pieces on that team. I thought that maybe the Saints, with the home field advantage, would they be able to do something about that? Unfortunately, the 49ers, with Mac Jones, of all people, was able to go into the Big Easy and get a win for the 49ers, who are now still undefeated at 2-0, while the Saints are now sitting at 0-2. The Bills, I talked about the Bills just a little while ago. They seem to be a team that they know they're good enough to win not just the AFC East, but hopefully make a run in the playoffs. So I'm sure they want this season to get over with as soon as possible, so that they can prove to a lot of doubters out there that they are elite. They're one of the few 2-0 teams they're one of the few 2-0 teams that are still obviously undefeated. And with the way things are going, I think they have Miami for their Week 3 Thursday night matchup. That should be a victory, if I'm not mistaken. So I could easily see them being 3-0 by Thursday night. And then I'm sure there will be tough opponents moving forward, but it's I don't know. It's tough for. It's not tough, but I mean for the Jets. This is what I mean. For the Jets, this is tough. Justin Fields was obviously knocked out. He had a concussion protocol, so the likeliness of him starting Week 3 is highly unlikely, I would say, because nowadays they're taking concussions more serious than they have ever been. So who knows who the starting quarterback is going to be for the Jets in their Week 3 matchup. Fields obviously could come back. Not saying it's not possible, but just because of what's happened with concussions and players after the retirement with concussions, like the player safety is more important now than it's ever been. So Yes, it sucks for the Jets being 0-2, and you traded for Justin Fields because you want him to be the quarterback to hopefully steer your ship in the right way. But if he's injured, hurt, and especially with the concussion, you don't want to take that lightly. So I wouldn't be surprised if they rested him for week 3. Now, obviously, if the doctors clear him, he'll be good to go, and maybe they can get their ish back on track. But a tough couple of weeks for the Jets to start this season off. All right, so I predicted for the next match between the Steelers and the Seahawks. This is obviously an inter-conference matchup. I was foolish enough to predict that the Steelers would win. I probably should have known better, but the Seahawks team, they're good. And I said this last week, and I said it during the offseason too, that the Seahawks, they can compete with the 49ers and the Cardinals and the Rams for that NFC West title. And I don't think they missed Geno Smith too much, I'll put it that way. But anyways, yeah, I did predict the Steelers would win. They've dropped to 1-1. The Seahawks are 1-1 as well. If I didn't mention before, the Jets are 0-2. The Bills are obviously still undefeated at 2-0. Now, speaking of those Rams, I predicted LA would go into Tennessee and win week 2, and they did. 33-19 would be the final. The Rams are now, if I'm not mistaken, 2-0 on the season, while the Titans have dropped to 0-2. Now, there's going to be some skeptics out there saying that, well, Tennessee should do this, they should do that. Is Cam Ward elite? Not every rookie is going to have a successful season. Don't believe me? Ask Caleb Williams just last year. It's going to be a tough road to hoe, I think, for the Titans. They're still, I think, a couple of years away from really being competitive. Now, I could bite my tongue and they could go on a crazy win streak, but I just think out of the 4 teams in the AFC South, Houston, I believe, should bounce back, even though they have struggled, and I'll get to them in just a second. The Colts, I'll get to them as well. They're doing really well. And the Jaguars, I think, are 1-1, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just take a quick little peek here. Yeah, they're 1-1. So the division's still technically wide open, but there are 2 teams that are 2 games back of first place. So that means you have to win 2 games just to try to catch up, and you have to hope that the other teams lose 2 games so you can play catch up. And I've said this in a lot of my videos, not just with football, but hockey as well, is that if you're relying on other teams to lose rather than concentrating on winning, you're going about this whole thing the wrong way. You need to concentrate on what your team can do and how you do as a whole. And if you're successful, great. But again, you can't rely on other teams to be like, I hope they lose next week. I hope they lose in 2 weeks so we can play catch up. No, you should have just won your previous games so you're not in a situation that you're like, we got to play catch up. So again, for the Titans, I think it's just going to be a really long season, unfortunately, but I do have faith in Cam Ward. As long as their O-line can be a little bit more consistent, keep them from getting sacked and hit a lot, then they'll be successful, like I said, in a couple of years. I just think this year is going to be tough. But just like with any team, when you're going through a rebuild and you have a high draft pick, there's not a lot of expectations for the following season. But as for the Rams, they're still 2-0, along with the 49ers. They're both undefeated, 2-0 on the season. I think both those teams, along with the Seahawks, and if the Cardinals can stay with them, I think all four of those teams can be very competitive, to say the least. Speaking of the Cardinals, here we go. They almost had a late game collapse. Unfortunately, their defense was able to hold them in check. They would hang on for a 27-22 victory. With the victory, the Cardinals are now sitting at 1-1. With the loss, unfortunately, the Panthers are still winless on the season at 0-2. Now, this game broke my heart. With the Broncos and Colts, I did predict that the Broncos would win. I should have also mentioned I did predict that Arizona won. They obviously did. But with the Broncos and Colts, I thought with their Week 1 victory over the Titans, I know it's not going to say a whole lot, but their defense looked strong, looked legitimate, didn't give up any touchdowns. The Week 2 against the Colts, it's like, where did their defense go? They gave up 2 touchdowns. They gave up 5 field goals. That's 29 points just right there. Now, granted, there's one play that sticks out more than anything. Well, there's two plays that stick out in my mind, but it shouldn't have come down to that second play. The first one was, I think it was third down for the Broncos. They were on the Colts, I think, 29-yard line, if I'm not mistaken. And Bo Nix threw the ball. It was obviously incomplete. Then they tried for the field goal, and obviously, unfortunately, Will Lutz missed that. So the game stayed where it was. But had they ran the ball, got a few extra yards, put Lutz in a better situation, then obviously he would have had a better chance, a higher chance of making that kick. And who knows what could have happened. Then that would have obviously forced Indy to score a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, because they were up by 5 points at that point, and then obviously the game kind of went away from them. So a very tough loss for the Broncos. There's no question about it. And obviously the whole, I'm sure I'm just biased saying this, but the call with the field goal attempts about the leverage, he held on to the guy for literally a second. He held on to the center, prevented him from getting up, but he wasn't anywhere close to blocking that kick. If they had blocked the kick, had got his fingertip on the ball and it made it go wide, and he used that momentum to help push forward, or push up, I should say, then I could agree with the call, because yes, you didn't give the center a chance to stand up after hiking the ball to block you, to prevent you from rushing the kicker. But when the guy's nowhere near the ball and he literally just pushed down on you for a second and he tried jumping up to touch a ball that wasn't anywhere near his hands, I thought that was a bogus call. And if that happened in the Super Bowl, you're telling me your team, if it was on the losing end, you wouldn't be upset about that? I think that's just a very controversial call. Again, it shouldn't have come down to a field goal attempt, because had they ran the ball when Denver had the chance, then obviously then it would have forced the Colts into a touchdown and 2-point conversion scenario. But unfortunately, it's not the way it is. The Colts got the victory. They are still undefeated. I think this is their first 2-0 start since 2009, when they had, obviously, Peyton Manning at the quarterback position. So this is a huge victory for the Colts. They are looking like they could come out of the AFC South now, since they have a game lead on the Jaguars and a 2-game lead on the Titans and the Texans, respectively, who should be 2-0. But unfortunately, they are not. And I will get to the Texans here in just a minute or two. So, yeah, huge victory for the Colts. Obviously, a bit of a setback for the Broncos. They need a better game in their Week 3 matchup. Otherwise, who knows how this season's going to pan out. Okay, this Sunday. Oh, this was the late Sunday game, or the other evening game, I should say. Afternoon game, wherever you are. Between the Chiefs and the Eagles. This is obviously a Super Bowl rematch from last year. I did predict that the Chiefs would win, because I thought they'd finally they'd have their first home game of the season. They'd obviously want to have a bounce back game against a team that they lost to in the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, they came up short, losing by a field goal. 20-17 would be the final score. So for the Eagles, they're still undefeated, 2-0 on the season. I will get to this little side note before I talk about the Chiefs and their record, that there were some controversial calls, especially when they did the tush push. I think it was on the fourth, if I'm not mistaken, it was a 4th down call to either get a touchdown, or a 4th down call to get the first down. There was a couple of different times that they ran the ball, and you can tell that the offensive lineman's helmet, at least their head, it was over the line of scrimmage, so therefore that should have technically been offside. But with because the line's so crowded, I think it's just so tough to be able to tell where the ball actually is, with all those behemoth man, whatever, at the front. So I'm sure if you're a Chiefs fan, you're probably bitter about that. If you're an Eagles fan, you're like, whatever, we've been getting away with this for 4 years now, so why complain now? Why just start some ish now? So for the Eagles, congratulations being 2-0 in the season. Again, one of the few teams that are still undefeated. For the Chiefs, this is the first time, not in the Patrick Mahomes era, that they started the season off 0-2. And the last time that Kansas City started the season off 0-2 was in the 2014-15 season, when they had Alex Smith at their quarterback. Yeah, that was a few years ago. And obviously they went on to miss the playoffs that year. They've made the playoffs every season since then. 3 with obviously with Alex Smith, and the rest with Patrick Mahomes at the helm. So this is new territory for the Chiefs, but I don't think that this is a team that's going to roll over. I don't think this is a team that's going to be like, oh, well, we'll just let this season go away. They clearly want to get back to the Super Bowl and be able to have another Super Bowl victory. And this is a team that can do it. I'm not, in no way in my mind, is there any doubt that this team will come back. And this is coming from a Broncos fan. I would love to see them finish below 500, but I know they'll snap out of this little funk. They'll get their rhythm going, and they will be a competitive team, and I would not be surprised if they made the playoffs this year. I know it sounds crazy, but again, even though it's only been 2 weeks into the season, there's still technically 15 more games to go, so 16 more weeks. So, yeah, I don't think the Chiefs are going to be going anywhere anytime soon. I believe they will bounce back next week. They'll get back to 500, I'm sure, at some point, and then they will be competitive throughout the season. And I believe by January they'll probably have an X beside their name, if not a Y, to get the division. So, anyway, that's that. Okay, now for the Vikings and the Falcons matchup. I did predict that the Vikings would win because they had such a monstrous game, a comeback against the Bears in week 1. This is their first home opener. J.J. McCarthy obviously seemed like he was a stud after defeating the Bears, and then he became a complete shell of himself. They only put up 6 points. They gave up 22 to the Falcons. The Falcons are now 1-1. The Vikings are 1-1. So both these teams are back to 500, and we'll see how both these teams do moving forward come next week. Okay, so we had 2 Monday night games. The first one was an interconference matchup between the Houston Texans and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, even though part of me thought Houston, with their home opener, they'll have a better chance at a victory with the home crowd behind them, obviously momentum. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be. Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers went in there, had a comeback for the ages, got the touchdown, went up by a point. Unfortunately, they were not able to convert on the 2-point conversion. The Texans weren't able to get a field goal, and that's how the game ended. So Tampa Bay starts the season off 2-0. They look like they are a legitimate team. And I said this at the beginning of the year that I thought either Tampa or Atlanta would be coming out of that NFC South. Now, granted, Atlanta could still catch them, even though they lost their Week 1 matchup. But Tampa Bay, I think they're a legitimate contender to make the playoffs and possibly win that division for like the 5th year in a row, it's going to feel like. All right, the last review from Monday is going to take place in Las Vegas as we have the Raiders and the Chargers. Now, I did predict that LA would win, and they sure did. 20-9 would be the final score. With the victory, the Chargers are 2-0 on the season, and after the loss, the Raiders are 1-1. So, with all the scores and with all the predictions, I managed to get 10 correct and 6 incorrect. So therefore, my record would have been 10-6 for week number 2. And my overall record after week 1 is 23-9. So I'm still above 500. I'll take that. So as long as I can stay above 500 for the remainder of the season, just like last year, I'll be absolutely content. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. All right, I might actually make this into a 2-video thing because I'm already 23 minutes into this and I don't want to make another half-an-hour one of doing a review. So I will end the video for here for my week 2 review, and I will upload another one for my week 3 previews. As always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative as well. Until next time, and as always, take care.